freelancing is actually a skill that can be taught. It is not something that you are either cut out for or not. It's not a personality trait. It's not some magical confidence gene that other people have but you don't. It's a skill that can be learned, practiced, and refined over time. And a big part of that skill is learning how to build systems that support you. So I'm going to break this down in 5 chapters today. We're going to start with clarity, what you actually want from this lifestyle, how to think about finding clients without feeling salesy or desperate, how to approach your portfolio without overworking it, and how to navigate the emotional ups and downs that come with working independently. And then we're going to end with talking about that you are the value and how you compound your business. I am going to walk you through the learnings that I have from my 15 years of freelancing, and not just show you how to get started, but also how to stay freelance without constantly feeling stressed or uncertain. Freelancing is essentially trading a steady paycheck for autonomy, and that can be incredibly freeing, but it also means that suddenly you are responsible for a whole lot more than just doing good work. You're now officially the person who has to bring in clients, manage relationship, think about money coming in, money coming out, plan for gaps between projects, handle things like healthcare and retirement savings, set boundaries around your time, and take care of yourself when things feel uncertain. So yes, welcome. You are now officially the CEO, CFO, COO, and HR department. Congratulations. Now where's the cake? You didn't bring one? Yeah, because that's also your job now. Now, that doesn't mean that freelancing has to be a hustle. It just means that it requires a different level of awareness and structure. And once you have that structure in place, that's when freedom and empowerment truly kick in. And that's what I want to help you build. Chapter 1, clarity, your anchor. Before you ask yourself how to freelance, I really think you need to ask yourself why. And I don't mean that in a fluffy, motivational way. I mean very practically. Do you want more flexibility? And if so, flexibility for what exactly? Sleeping in, Pilates, emotional peace? Let's be specific. Do you want more money? Do you want more control over your time? Do you want to travel? Do you want creative autonomy to work less or just differently? Because different answers here lead to very different freelance strategies. And it's something that you want to keep checking in on because freelancing has a way of pulling you into momentum, deadlines, opportunities that can slowly drift you away from the original reason that you chose this path in the first place. It's very easy to get lost in the sauce and forget why you're structuring your life around this slightly masochistic way of living. I'm joking. Kind of. But truly, clarity here is important for your well-being. Freelancing without clarity is like opening up Google Maps without a destination. You'll be moving, but you won't arrive. Now, let's talk about finding clients. Deciding who you're actually trying to work with. Another huge mistake I see people make is say,
I just need clients.
I get it. That feeling is real, but find clients is not a strategy. What you actually need is the right type of clients for where you are right now and where you want to go. A junior designer and a senior designer or a creative director, they should not be chasing the same opportunities. Same thing if you're dreaming of working on ad campaigns versus apps and products in tech, or you want to do print work, music. As you all know, design can be applied in endless ways in almost any industry. So to narrow this down to your strengths and real dreams is key to keep your sanity. So instead of asking who will hire me, I want you to ask who should hire me? Who would actually benefit from the way that you work? And where would you add the most value? And where would you grow the most? You don't fish in the ocean with a spoon. Stay with me. Basically, you choose what waters you're going to fish in, and then you pick the right tools for the type of fish you want to catch. So now let's talk about the tools. The struggle for most creatives is how to approach getting new clients without feeling awkward, salesy, or desperate. There are many ways to find clients, but in my experience, most of them fall into 2 buckets. The first one is proximity, and the second is initiative. Proximity is basically about being in the right rooms at the right time. Proximity is about putting yourself in environments where the kinds of people that you want to work with already exist. That can look like meetups, industry events, creative talks, co-working spaces, paid communities and memberships like Soho House or Neue House, just for example. And yes, this is where I want to say something that might be slightly uncomfortable, that sometimes if you want to make a little money, you got to spend a little money. It's called investment, darling. An upfront cost for a later, greater return. And I know that that can feel scary, especially early on if you haven't done it before, but I always ask people to think about it this way. If you invest a certain amount in a community or environment or a membership or a subscription, and over the course of a year, you meet just one person who leads you to a great opportunity or a project or a new client, a referral or a long-term connection, would that initial investment be paid off? Usually the answer is yes, many times over. Most opportunities don't come from one perfect moment or a perfect conversation. They come from familiarity, from being present and showing up over time and letting trust build through natural conversations that aren't rushed or forced. And honestly, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You do not have to be the most charming person in the room. You just have to be consistently present and mildly pleasant. I think you can do that. I believe in you. But if you want to deep dive into the art of networking, I have 2 high recs for you. How to Talk to Anyone, or the classic How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Now let's talk initiative, what people usually call outreach. And this is a more controllable method of the 2. And by controllable, I certainly don't mean easier, but it's more of a numbers game. And once you've mastered it, you'll have a little bit more control over the outcome and the returns can be massive. And the key thing to understand here is this: outreach is not pitching. It's starting conversations. So whether you use LinkedIn or email or something else, the mindset is the same. You are not starting off asking for a job. You are offering help, extra bandwidth, relief during busy periods. And if you approach it calmly without trying to say everything at once, it becomes much more human and much more effective. I go much deeper into exactly how I do this in a separate video where I go through step by step what to say and when. But the important thing is the reframe. Finding clients isn't about convincing strangers to like you. It's about putting yourself in the right environments at the right time and initiating conversations without pressure. You want to stay in motion long enough for things to compound over time. You're basically planting seeds ongoingly. Some grow quickly, some take more time, some of them don't grow at all. And you have to learn how to love the game here. Don't take no replies too seriously or personal, and don't fear rejection. If rejections were fatal, freelancers would be extinct. Once you embrace the system of sales, this becomes another steady pillar of your freelance life, something that you no longer fear, but you feel in control of. Quick pause here before we continue. If you are enjoying this episode so far, I really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. It genuinely helps me to know what kind of content is useful to you, and it allows me to keep making more of these longer, in-depth episodes. And also, make sure to check out the description below. I regularly add new resources there, free templates, cheat sheets, and materials that are meant to actually support you as you grow in your design career. All right, let's keep going. Chapter 3, the portfolio. Now, whatever your strategy is in reaching out to new clients, most likely there will be a point where they look at your portfolio. And I know incredibly talented designers and creatives who don't actually have an amazing portfolio. And sometimes that's because they don't even need one. If you already have a solid network, if you're getting work through relationships, trust, and referrals, that's a great place to be. Most people, they really start working on their portfolio when they're in some kind of transition. Whether or not you need a strong portfolio really depends on where you are in your career, what you're trying to change, and what you're trying to move towards. Maybe you want to level up. Maybe you want to shift industries. If you're full-time, maybe you want a new job. Maybe you want to attract different types of clients or do different type of work. And here's the thing. If you had a great conversation with someone and then you send over a portfolio that feels unfinished, broken, outdated, or chaotic, it can quickly undo a lot of that goodwill. So your portfolio isn't just showing your designs. It's showing how you think, how you structure information visually, how you tell a story. And if you're asking someone to trust you with their brand, their product, their deadlines, that clarity really matters. So you might be wondering,
okay, Alex, what does a great portfolio actually look like?
And honestly, there's no single right answer to that, but I can tell you this. Most people, they try way too hard. They over-design, they over-conceptualize, they try to make it memorable at all costs, and suddenly the parallax is flying and the cursor has its own personality and the page is moving when nobody asked it to, and the viewer is sitting there like, okay, interesting, but what does this person actually do? And that is what they will remember. Not the concept, not the clever interaction, but they're going to remember the confusion. And I can assure you, they're going to remember not to hire you. Your portfolio does not need to win awards. It needs to not scare people away. It doesn't need to be unforgettable. It needs to be understandable. That is your best bet. And so when you're determined that your portfolio needs a little refresh, I really don't want you to fall into the trap that so many of us do, and thinking that a brand new website redesigned from scratch is going to solve all of our existential problems. Think of this first part of the process in terms of minimum viable products. In other words, what is the minimum work that you need to do for your portfolio to do its job? The job is to make you feel credible, to help people understand how you can help, who you can help, and to make it easy to contact you. That's it. That is why I often recommend starting with just 2 or 3 really strong projects. Not 10, not 20, because no one is going to sift through 20 projects and be like, oh, here on the 17th project, I feel convinced. They are going to skim. They're going to get a feeling. They're going to decide pretty quickly whether this feels aligned or not. And then they're going to want to talk to you more in depth. So 1 or 2 or 3 strong, well-presented projects that clearly show how you think are far more effective than a long list of work that you're only half proud of. No one needs a full tasting menu to know that the chef is good. One excellent dish will do. So you don't need to build your final portfolio right now in one go. If you are early on, or if you don't have a lot of time, it's more likely a better strategy to strip things back. Just simplify, remove some projects, clean it up, make it feel calm, make it feel intentional and professional. You can always build from there. And in fact, one of the most effective ways to grow a portfolio is in response to real interest. So when someone books a call with you, that's often when the moment comes where it actually makes sense to prepare a case study that's especially relevant for them. That way you're not pouring hours into work that may never be seen or needed. You're working on the right thing at the right time. So if you take anything from this section, let it be this. Your portfolio doesn't need to be perfect or vast. It needs to be clear. It needs to feel intentional, and it needs to reflect where you are and where you're going. Chapter 4, the emotional rhythms of freelancing. One of the most important skills that you will learn as a freelancer actually has very little to do with design or tools or strategy. It's learning how to regulate your nervous system during slower periods, because they will come. This is something that almost no one prepares you for. Early on in my freelancing journey, anytime I could see a gap coming up, a project ending without the next one being fully lined up, it could send me straight into anxiety, like questioning all my life choices anxiety. Was I doing something wrong? Should I have stayed employed? Is this really sustainable? Did I miscalculate everything? And if you've felt that, I just want you to know that it's incredibly normal. Freelancing has a rhythm to it. There are periods where everything is really busy and deadlines pile up, your calendar is full, you're in momentum mode. And then there are quieter periods, and those quieter periods can feel really uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to equating being busy with being successful or being safe. But over time, if you stick with freelancing, you're going to start to see that this kind of ebb and flow isn't a sign that something is broken. It is part of the system. And the real shift happens when you stop zooming in week by week, panic scanning your calendar, and instead start zooming out, looking at your year as a whole. And this is where I want you to come back to that first exercise that I mentioned earlier, where you ask yourself why you wanted this lifestyle in the first place. Because when you zoom out, those quieter periods can start to look very different. They can become a space where you rest your nervous system. Maybe this is a time where you work on personal creative projects or invest a little bit extra in your health. Maybe you travel. Maybe you spend more time with your family and your friends. Maybe you learn a new skill, reconnect with parts of your life that get neglected when work is intense. And slowly you begin to not only trust the rhythm, but you're going to really start to appreciate it. And you begin to understand that not every moment needs to be optimized and not every quiet week needs to be fixed. Periods without work aren't failure. They're actually part of the system. So learning to stay regulated during those periods and not spiraling, not catastrophizing, not rushing into the wrong yes, that's one of the most mature freelance skills that you can develop. It's also one of the things that allows you to do this long term without burning out or constantly feeling like you're behind. Chapter 5, you are the value. So something I learned with experience is that while my portfolio and my work might have gotten me in the door, what got me hired again and again was me. I was the value. My approach to working, my approach to design, my approach to collaboration, my communication style, my ability to reduce risk and to create trust. Clients don't just want good design. They want to feel like they can relax having you on their team and be certain that they in turn will be able to deliver to their client within the deadline and at a high level. This is why growing beyond the technical skills matters so much. It's really important for you to take care of your body, get your sleep, move, have a life, and read about communication, collaboration, negotiation, rhetorics. The more tools that you add, the more valuable you become. Your work gets you in the room, but your soft skills and your approach is what will keep you there and have you get rehired over and over. So I want to leave you with this. Freelancing might not be for everyone, and that's okay, but it's not a personality trait either. It is a skill. And if you feel like you're not cut out for it, it might just mean that you're not comfortable yet and you need to expand into it. And it's a lot about building systems that will allow you to feel the freedom without panicking. So you don't need to do everything perfectly at once. You just need to do the right next thing and trust the process one step at a time. I believe in you. Keep creating, keep accelerating, and remember, your dreams won't work unless you do. I'll see you in the next one.